Okay, so last week my little Triumph Scrambler 900 needed to go in with Triumph for a service, and because of a holiday and some other stuff, that meant that I had to get a loaner bike from Triumph for 3 full days. And since they basically told me that I could get whichever bike I wanted, I decided to go with the meanest and baddest in the room, the Triumph Rocket 3. This is usually not a motorcycle channel, even though I have by now done 2 or 3 other videos about motorcycles. But since the Rocket 3 is kind of an interesting bike and I also do have a bit of a narcissistic personality disorder, I kind of thought that you probably wanted to know more about it. The bike, not the personality disorder. So let's get into it. Now, for those of you who have never heard of this demon of a bike, here are a few key factors. It weighs about 320 kilos and has an engine that is bigger than probably most car engines here in Europe. It sports a 2500cc 3-cylinder engine. To put that into perspective for you, my Scrambler 900 obviously has an engine with a capacity of 900cc divided up into 2 cylinders. Now the Rocket 3 has 3 cylinders, each with about the same capacity as both of the cylinders from my Scrambler combined. That is quite a lot. And with that massive engine capacity, it puts out about 170 horsepower, but more importantly, 220 newton meters of torque. And yeah, I mean, just look at it. It's a beefy boy. I did like this new Storm Black on Black color wave. Makes it look a bit like a Batman motorcycle, but still, is not exactly pretty, especially with those twin headlights. But it has a certain cool factor, that's for sure, even though I have to admit that this GT spec doesn't help in that regard. It's really not something that I would personally go for if it was my bike. For one, it kind of looks wrong, at least to my eyes, but also just in terms of the functionality. Because me personally, I don't particularly like the foot forward riding position, especially on a bike that can go fast, because when you're riding fast, it kind of feels like you're pushing against the wind with your legs, and I don't know, feels kind of wrong to me. And mind you, the Rocket 3 can go pretty fast. The touring handlebar is comfy, but it also looks a bit wrong, and the same is true for the pillion backrest, even though I have to say that my wife enjoyed both the seat comfort and the feeling of safety, because this backrest would have stopped her from just slipping off of the back under hard acceleration. And so yeah, it gives a sense of security, I guess, which is not to be underrated, especially on a bike like this, because as you can imagine, this bike can accelerate pretty hard if you just crank open that throttle. Speaking of the power and the acceleration, there is certainly sort of a bullyish charm to riding something that is capable of completely wiping the floor with just about anything that you might come across in traffic. It's also a bit of a flex, considering this costs anywhere from 26 to just under 30k, depending on your spec, which is certainly not a lot in the world of cars, but pretty high up there for a motorcycle. So yeah, pretty insane thing overall. I would rate it as a good compensator for a small penis. Not exactly my area of expertise though, if you know what I'm saying. What was most surprising to me though was just how easy it was to ride. Now mind you, I've only been riding motorcycles for about 2 years now, and the first year I was only riding on a tiny 125cc motorcycle that had a massive and neck-snapping 11 HP, and even with my big boy Scrambler 900, it's not exactly like I'm riding an all-out racing machine. So I think you will understand that I was a bit intimidated to the prospect of riding something this big and this powerful at first. And truth be told, that only got worse when I first saw this thing in real life, because I actually made the order, if you like, to have that guy as a loaner on the telephone without actually ever having seen one in the flesh. But yeah, turns out it's a total breeze to ride. Honestly, the 2 biggest adjustments for me in terms of the riding were, for one, the vastly more aggressive brakes, and also that foot forward riding position. Now the brakes I got used to pretty much within, 2 minutes or so of riding this thing, but the foot forward riding position took me probably a solid half an hour or so to get somewhat comfortable with. Again, I do not like it, but at least I got sort of used to it. The throttle and acceleration, however, were just super controllable and very easy to get used to. Now obviously I didn't just jump on the bike, crank that throttle wide open and rip the fat burnout off of the dealership parking lot. For once, because I wouldn't actually know how to do something this cool, but also because I don't have either a death wish, well I guess, or the cash to reimburse the dealership if I would have damaged this bike. So instead, I really just eased into it, which to Triumph's credit is really simple to do because they have dialed that acceleration curve and the throttle feeling in to perfection. So the power, even though it was certainly always there, was super controllable even for an inexperienced little wannabe like myself. With that being said, if you tell this bike to go, it fucking goes, man. Doesn't matter which gear you're in, how fast you're going, what revs, etc. It just fucking takes off like an actual rocket. The name is just spot on. It's completely insane. But luckily, especially for somebody who is again rather inexperienced like myself, because of that heavy weight and the long wheelbase, this is certainly not a bike that is super wheelie heavy, even under hard acceleration. It is just super planted and just does what you want it to do. Now, all of that, of course, does mean that this bike is not a bike that likes to corner hard. Or maybe I just didn't feel comfortable doing it. Kind of hard to tell. But overall, I think, especially with the foot forward riding position, it's not exactly something that invites you to really dive into those corners. Overall, it's more relaxed and laid back in terms of the riding position and overall feel, which felt sometimes a bit at odds with the looming presence of such insane levels of power. Much to my surprise though, I found it super easy to maneuver in traffic, even with little to no speed. So yeah, aside from the absolutely horrendous turning circle, this bike was actually surprisingly easy to handle and to maneuver in traffic. Good stuff. Okay, so with all of that said, obviously I didn't have this bike for long enough to give you like a long-term user's experience. But as I said in the intro, I at least wanted to share my experience of riding this bike for a couple of days. And I absolutely loved it. One last thing though, in regards to the sound of this motorcycle, I really liked it, but it sounded very different to what I would expect a motorcycle that looks like this to sound like. Now the audio from my action cam footage is all messed up simply because I didn't record the audio externally. And so sadly I cannot really show you what it sounded like under hard acceleration, but if I would have to describe it, I would honestly say that it sounded somewhat similar to a Porsche 911. Which I guess is not too much of a stretch since it's a 3-cylinder, I guess. But yeah, very different to what I expected. It's very sophisticated in its sound. It's loud, but not obnoxiously loud. So it's not the kind of bike that your neighbors will hate you for. So in conclusion, after riding this bike for 3 days, I can definitely say that I could absolutely see myself buying a Rocket 3 as an add-on to my collection of one. So as an add-on to my Scrambler 900, I could not see myself replacing my Scrambler with that bike. If I were to buy one though, I would definitely just go with the regular spec and not with the GT spec, as again, the touring style foot forward position and the handlebar really weren't for me. So personally, I'm not into super fast and sporty bikes, hence why I got myself a Scrambler 900. But I have to admit that the style of riding that the Rocket 3 invoked was very much up my alley. It's kind of nice to be super chill and comfy on your bike while also having reality bending levels of power reserves on tap at any time. Plus again, my wife said she really enjoyed riding as a pillion on the bike because it was super comfortable and also because of that backrest, which again on my spec we probably wouldn't have. But yeah, maybe at least the comfort would still be there. So I guess all I got to do now is figure out how to get rich so that I could actually afford having another bike on top of my Scrambler 900. That's it for today's video though. Thank you so much for watching. If you're not only interested in motorcycle related stuff, but maybe also in camera or photography or EDC related content, maybe consider subscribing. Otherwise, thanks for watching once again. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care. Bye.